Lowercase, too.
I wouldn't expect any.
All right. Okay, here's special, here's an extra credit for one of the raffle tickets, if they'll give one out. ASCII code 0010. 0000 is what? Who said space? Give the man a raffle ticket. Should I start? Oh, okay. Cool, welcome. My name's, oops, wait, it's not, it should be showing the PowerPoint slide actually at this point, and it's not, so the media player has taken over, so I'm going to shut that down and see what it does. Do you guys got control of the sound levels, and we'll fake it when we get to that point? Yeah. Okay. Hi, my name is Ilanka Dunnan. I am a professional game developer out of St. Louis, Missouri. I make multiplayer games on the internet at play.net. And I got involved with this whole crypto scene by giving a talk on games at DragonCon. First of all, how many people here have heard me speak before?
I heard you on BIMREP.
Okay, on BIMREP, but how many have actually come to a talk? Okay, good. So for you guys, you know, sometimes I hide puzzles in my presentations. In this case, I did not do that, just so you don't have to worry about looking for one of the secret things, because Kryptos is like the big puzzle, and so I want everyone to be able to focus on Kryptos. So I was speaking about games at DragonCon, and DragonCon is a big convention down in Atlanta, and they've got different tracks on different things, and they've got the Star Wars track and the Star Trek track and the Buffy the Vampire Slayer track. And one of the tracks was on Electronic Frontiers, and that's where I was speaking about multiplayer games on the internet. And hackers from SE2600 were coming in, and they were speaking about computer security, hacking 101, hacking 201, how to keep computers secure. So because we were all kind of speakers in the same track, that's how I kind of got to know 2600, and because we'd all be like having a beer at the end of the day. And through them, I heard about this code that had been released at the Freaknik 3 convention in 1999 in Nashville. And it was a code that had been released as a challenge to the attendees at the convention, but it had been a year and no one had cracked the code yet. So they were still handing out flyers as a way of promoting the next Freaknik convention. And I decided, after DragonCon, I was stuck home one weekend with the flu or something, and I was kind of bored, and I started looking at the code. And I just got really, really obsessed with it. And I couldn't put the thing down. I got completely antisocial, but I cracked it. And I won the prize, which was a free trip to the next Freaknik convention, and free t-shirts, and free drinks, and other stuff, and free hotel. And then I started cracking a bunch of other codes. And I went around a bunch of the hacker conventions, especially in the southeast United States, and I cracked a bunch of other codes. I actually cracked so many that I was banned from competition. For example, at the AtlantaCon convention, when they released their code and it was on a sheet of paper, and at the bottom of the paper it said, "Note, past puzzle crackers are ineligible for prizes associated with solving the AtlantaCon puzzle. Give someone else a chance, Ilanka." Okay? So I sort of had these crypto skills, and then September 11th happened, and I was wondering, you know, well, maybe I could help out with the war on terrorism or something, and so I called up my local FBI and asked them and said, hey, you know, can I help? And they said no, and I kept calling back and saying, can I help, and finally I got an agent who asked me what it was I know about, and I said, well, I know about, you know, UU encoding, and I know about PGP and steganography, and then he said, hey, you know, steganography. We've been hearing rumors that Al-Qaeda might have been using steganography as a way of sending hidden messages. And there's probably people out, you know, in Washington, D.C., the big brains that know all about cryptography. But, you know, we're here in St. Louis. We're in the local field office, and it's not really our mission. So could you come in and, like, give us a little talk about what steganography is? And so they thought I was, I think, going to put together this little 10-minute talk. And I put together the 70-slide PowerPoint presentation. And I went all over steganography and what the state of the art was on it, and what the rumors, the fact and fiction were about whether or not Al-Qaeda was using it. I don't believe Al-Qaeda was, at least not for planning the September 11th attacks. And then through that talk, I started getting invited to some other interesting places as well. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go on here. So in this talk, what I'm going to go over is I'm going to go over Kryptos, which is the sculpture at the center of CIA headquarters. There are 4 codes on Kryptos. 3 of the 4 have been solved. The 4th one has not been solved yet. It is one of the most famous unsolved codes in the world. And I'll be going over what the first 3 parts say, how they were encrypted, and sort of the state of the art of knowledge about what is known about that 4th part. I will also be going over a sister sculpture of Kryptos called the Cyrillic Projector, which had the same artist who made Kryptos for the CIA also made a separate sculpture that had KGB codes on it. And I'll talk about that. And we cracked that one, and I'll talk about how we did it. I'm going to go over definitely more about part 4 of Kryptos. And I'm also going to be talking about pop culture. Some of you may have heard of this book called The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. And hidden in the artwork of the book jacket, there are 5 puzzles. And Dan Brown has said that these puzzles give clues about the subject of his next novel. 2 of those puzzles refer to the Kryptos sculpture. And I'll be going into more detail about how those puzzles are put together and what we do or don't know about it. I could also probably do a whole talk just on the fact and fiction of the Da Vinci Code, so if anybody wants to talk to me about that later, I can definitely help. Brown has actually called me and asked me for advice about, tell me about Kryptos, tell me what this means, tell me what that means. And I won't go into all the details of what we've talked about, but I can tell you some of that. And I also have this. I actually have my own book of codes, which Amazon finally started shipping the pre-orders yesterday, so I'm really excited about that. So I'm going to be talking a bit. Okay. So that's my title at Summitronics, Play.net. I've also been involved with computers forever. My father was involved with computers back in the days when they were the huge room-sized mainframes, the kind where if the computer crashed, they needed to reboot it by re-entering the operating system by hand in binary, by flipping the little switches. And he used to take me into work with him. And I have memories. Some of my earliest memories are being in those huge data centers. And I remember I really liked the key punch machines because when they were punching the holes through the cards, they'd be kicking out all the little chat. And so I'd always go straight for the drawers under the key punch machines and be playing with the confetti. So I thought computers were fun because they always made neat confetti to play with. And some of the other things, some of the other conventions I've spoken at, DEF CON. I got invited to speak at the NSA Cryptologic History Symposium last year, Hackers Conference, ShmooCon, a whole bunch of other places, and now at Nauticon. Okay. Those are some of the codes that I've cracked. Another thing that some of you may have read in the news is so after September 11th, I organized a crisis center for my company because many of my customers in our multiplayer games were affected by the events of September 11th, and they wanted to know, how's so-and-so in New York, how's so-and-so in DC, has anybody heard from them? And so I organized a big database. And so we just had hundreds of reports streaming into this email address. And one of the reports that came in was from one of my less scrupulous customers who's actually from Cleveland. I'm just going to check. Is he here in the room by any chance? Oh, okay, good. All right. He used September 11th as an opportunity to declare himself dead, and then was going around online pretending to be his own widow and really traumatizing a lot of people. There were a couple articles about that in the Plain Dealer and also in the Cleveland Free Times, and I have links to all that on my website if anybody. How many people here are from Cleveland? I'm just curious. Okay, yeah, you guys can probably get that. I'd actually love to do some research in the newspaper archives here if anybody has access to that. I talked about the Cyrillic Projector. And then as part of my Kryptos research, people kept asking me, how famous is Kryptos? How famous is Kryptos? And I decided to make a list of what were the world's most famous unsolved codes because no one had done such a thing yet. And I made this little one web page on my site, and it just became hugely popular. Just tens of thousands of people pouring in, and it keeps getting picked up by the blogosphere. It's been like dug, the DIGG like 3 times. People just love it. So a British book publisher contacted me mid-2005, pretty much based on the attention around the famous Unsolved Codes page, and asked me if I'd be interested in putting together a book of codes, simple codes, and also some information on the unsolved codes, and that's this book here. Are any of my contributors here in the room? Yeah, okay, Aesthetics is here. I can't see through all the lights, but I just wanted to check. Okay. All right. This is the Freaknik 3 code that started all the fuss. I won't go into detail. But it was basically several different cryptographic systems, and it was sort of like peeling an onion, and then it ended up pointing to a website. And then there was some steganography in there as well. And then after I'd cracked it, I wrote this tutorial about how it was put together. And I wrote in a very cyberpunk, kind of a tongue-in-cheek style. So if you like that kind of writing, it's kind of a fun read. I keep having to fix the links on it because web rot keeps kicking in. And I say, go to this link, and that link isn't any good anymore. But I've got a lot of things mirrored, a lot of things are pointing to archive.org. So it's still pretty much readable at this point. So through the Freaknik 3 code, there were some dead ends. And one of the dead ends, one of the red herrings was, OK, now go solve this. And so there was a link to the CIA's website, and that's how I first heard about the crypto sculpture in 2000. And I didn't really do a lot of research on it at that point, other than reading a couple articles. But then after September 11th, I have a cousin who works in Washington, D.C. He sometimes works at the Pentagon. He had a very, very close call on the morning of September 11th. Some of the people he works with were killed. And so in fall of 2001, I went out to D.C. and I was visiting my cousin, and I hugged him, and we went out to the memorial at the Pentagon, and then we were driving around, and he said, well, you know, as long as you're here in Washington, D.C., there's a lot of other tourist attractions. Is there anything else you'd like to see? And I thought about it, and I thought, well, you know, Kryptos. Yeah, I'd really like to see Kryptos. And he said, well, where is Kryptos? And I'm like, it's at the center of CIA headquarters. And he said, okay, that's in Langley. And I'm like, yeah. And he says, okay, well, where in Langley? I'm like, I'll find out. But it got a little hard at that point because there's no street address for the CIA headquarters. I mean, it's not like you can just go to MapQuest and say, give me directions to CIA. And so it was kind of difficult to find it. This was before Google Earth. This was before Windows Live and all those. And so what I ended up doing was actually something similar to what Google Earth does, which is I sort of knew what the building looked like because I'd seen like Tom Clancy movies with the overhead views of CIA headquarters. And I went and I downloaded a bunch of satellite reconnaissance pictures of the Langley, Virginia area. And then just went looking around until I found the right outline of the building, and then I knew where CIA headquarters was. And I gave the directions to my cousin, and we figured we'd drive by, and we'd kind of like just drive by the service road and kind of scope things out. But the thing is when you take the exit, and there is a sign saying next exit CIA, but when you take the exit, there's no service road. You take the exit and you're there, and there's this huge gate, and there's barbed wire across the top, and there's a guard shack, and all these big guys with guns that come pouring out of the guard shack, asking very reasonable questions in 2001. Who are you, and why are you here? And we said, hey, we're just here to see Kryptos. And they went, Kryptos, sorry, you can't get in. You know, entrance to the CIA is for people with official business only. And so I was saying, okay, can I talk my way into CIA headquarters? And so I tried to think of all the stuff, you know, I'm saying, well, you know, is there like a public tour day? And they said, nope, sorry, official business only. And I said, well, is there, can I get an invitation from my congressman? And they said, nope, sorry, official business only. And I was ticking down everything on my list, and they were very polite, but very firm, and they big guys, guns. And so we finally said, okay, we're not going to get into CIA today, and we reluctantly turned away. And but I kept thinking about, okay, official business, and because I wasn't going to give up on it. Now, parallel with all this, I had that other thing where I'd contacted the FBI, and the FBI had asked me to put together this talk on steganography, and I'm thinking, can I use that talk on steganography as a way of talking my way into CIA headquarters? So when I put together my talk on steganography, and steganography, by the way, is most of the people in this audience probably already know, but it's a way of hiding messages inside of pictures. And so as my example of steganography, one of my examples, I used that picture, which is off the CIA website, and I hid stuff inside of it in my PowerPoint presentations. And then every time I gave the talk, I'd show the slide and I would say, boy, I'd love to give this talk someday at CIA. And every time I gave the talk, boy, I'd love to sit on that rock and just look at that sculpture for a while. I'd love to talk at CIA. Well, at one point, I was invited to DEF CON, and I was giving the talk there. And how many people here have been to DEF CON? Just curious, probably a fair number. Okay, so I was in the big roof tent, and I'm giving my talk on steganography, and saying, boy, I'd really love to give the talk at CIA. And at the end of the talk, you know, people come up, they're giving business cards and all sorts of, what do you think about this, what do you think about that? And one person that came up to the podium, they leaned really close, and they said, I work at Langley. I think I can get you in. I'm like, cool. I don't want to be paid. I just want like 2 hours to sit on that rock and look at Kryptos. And they said, okay, well, we'll talk to you later about it. They gave me a first name and a phone number. I didn't get a last name. And then we kind of got pulled away by the different convention stuff. So the first thought in my mind was, okay, is this really somebody that works at CIA, or is this just somebody at DEF CON who's pulling my chain and saying that they work at CIA? And so after the convention, I called the phone number and I talked to them. I said, yeah, we're at CIA. Can you send us a copy of your slides? We'd love to have you come speak. And I'm like, well, you have to prove to me you work at CIA first. And they said, well, how am I supposed to prove that? I said, well, send me an email from an official CIA email address. And they said, well, I don't have